What is up, party people? Welcome back to my channel. I'm Jamila. This is JemilaBeReadin, because I do be reading. And today we are going to talk about the book, One of Our Kind by Nicola Yoon. I promised that I would make a standalone review video about this book, and I'm here to deliver, albeit a little bit late. So here we are. Sorry in advance if I sound a little bit raspy. I went to a Pitbull concert a few days ago, and I did scream a lot. T-Pain was also there. So my voice is still recovering, unfortunately, and I sound a little bit off, but I'm here, and I will persevere as we talk about One of Our Kind. I'm just going to have the picture up here because I don't really feel like holding this, and it also doesn't even really have a cover because this is the art copy. So let's talk about what first intrigued me about this book, and then, or rather, what intrigued me to pick up this book. And then I'll do a walkthrough of the plot, and there will be spoilers, and then we'll kind of discuss after that. I did watch some interviews. I watched like 3 or 4 different interviews of Nicola Yoon talking about this book when she was doing her promotional tour, just because I was really curious to see like what she was thinking and like what inspired this book. You know, I feel like I kind of go both ways, because on one hand, I think a book should stand on its own without authorial intent to a certain degree, because people, like, once your book is out there, people are going to interpret it in certain ways, and intent obviously does not override impact. But I do think it is sometimes helpful to understand where an author is coming from, or what was going on in their mind, or what inspired them when they decided to write the book that they wrote. So that is part of the reason why I spent so much time looking at some of these interviews, just because it's just so we'll get into it. So, okay. I think I mentioned this during my wrap up where I first talked about this book. I was sent an email, I feel like maybe more than one email, asking if I wanted an art copy of this book. And I swear I didn't respond. At least I don't think. I do kind of have a really shitty memory, so there is an off chance that I may have said yes to an art copy of this book, but I don't recall responding to the email at all, especially because at the point that I was reached out to about this art copy, I'd already started to see reviews about this book, and I was like, ooh, you know what? I think I'm okay for now. I think, like, if I do want to check it out, I'll just get it from the library or something. But then this inevitably showed up at my apartment, and I was like, okay. I didn't end up reading it before it came out, but it did. It came out in June, and it's nearly October now. It is what it is, you know? And I just saw so many negative reviews. I saw so many negative reviews, in particular from a lot of my mutuals. And usually when I see negative reviews for my mutuals, I'm like, great, I think I might pass on this one. But I just found like what people were saying to be so intriguing. Not that I didn't believe them, but I was like, wow, this is just really kind of fascinating to witness, because I feel like Nicola Yoon had been kind of like a beloved author up until this point. This is Nicola Yoon's adult debut. It's a mystery thriller. Up until this point, she had been writing contemporary YA romances. So this was a departure from her norm, which kind of intrigued me as well. But I knew a lot of these people had loved her YA books, so I was like, wow, what is going on in this book? And in particular, I was seeing a lot of people saying that this book was actually anti-Black. And I was like, whoa, that's wild. And so eventually I just decided to pick this one up. I had it already. I was kind of curious to see where I would land on it. And I mean, like I said, I believed my mutuals, and I am pretty much right there with them for the most part. And I'll kind of talk about more about my overall thoughts at the end. But let let's get into this book, okay? It has been a little bit of a bit of time since I read it, so sorry in advance if my walkthrough of the plot is a little hazy, but this, like I said, is Nicola Yoon's adult debut. It's a mystery thriller that's being pitched as Get Out meets Stepford Wives, and I feel like that is very evocative. I think it really makes you understand what this book is going to be about. Okay, so we're following Jasmine Williams. She is a public defender, and she is very much into social justice and social justice causes, and just really in tune with that. I don't want to call her a social justice warrior because that has a negative connotation, but I actually think it might be an apt description of her in this context. She is a bit much, okay? But we'll get into that. She is married to her husband, King, and they have one son together, and she's actually pregnant throughout this book with their second child. So they live in California, and they get the opportunity to purchase a home in this town called Liberty, which is pretty much an all-black utopia of sorts. It's a very wealthy neighborhood, although there are class distinctions. There's like the super wealthy part, and then the kind of like middle class, up like lower wealthy, if that's even a thing. And like I said, it's all black. All of the teachers are black. Every store clerk is black. All of the police officers are black. So they move there, and Jasmine is having a hard time getting settled into this neighborhood. Like I said, she's very much social justice minded, to the point where she's practically a caricature. We don't really know much about her personality or what she likes or really who she is as an individual outside of her work and her social justice-ness. Like, that is basically all she's thinking about and all she's talking about with other people, to the point where other people are kind of like, whoa, you know? And so she's having a hard time acclimating to this new neighborhood, especially when she begins to realize that everyone there is very, everyone is very wealthy, and a lot of them are quite the opposite of her. They're not really thinking about the plight of black people. All they really care about is, I guess what wealthy people care about: art, wellness, I don't know. And so she decides that she also wants to start a chapter of Black Lives Matter in this neighborhood, and this is when she's starting to get a lot of pushback from other people. They're just weirdly not interested. They just kind of glaze over. No one really wants to talk about it. It's a bit odd, but she meets another woman there, Keisha. She meets Keisha, who is an elementary school teacher. She teaches at the same school where Jasmine's son is attending, but is not his teacher. So they realize that they're like-minded individuals, and they get together. And there's another guy, I forget his name, who's also similar. They are there, and they're also just like, yeah, like my partner has just really like adapted well into this neighborhood. It's so weird, because Jasmine is also noticing that King has been really settling in well, and also going to this wellness center at the top of the hill in this neighborhood like every night. And everyone's kind of like talking about this wellness center. They're like, oh, you should go, it's so relaxing. They're constantly bringing it up, and it's a little strange, right? So Jasmine, Keisha, and other guy they take it upon themselves to try to start this Black Lives Matter chapter. They're running into a lot of walls. Then we kind of fast forward. There's not like a ton of things that happen in this book, so it's kind of hard to like walk you through it in depth. But there's a one-off moment where Jasmine and King go back to their old neighborhood and have dinner with a friend, another couple friend, and this couple is like, oh, we're expecting, and you know, they're congratulating, and Jasmine ends up talking about how it's important that you get a black doctor, and starts talking about all of the statistics about black women who are pregnant and their higher rates of death and this and that, and it just like really dampens this exciting news that they're sharing in this happy moment, because she just like suddenly just goes in and is like really hard about like this and this, all these things, and it's like kind of frightening to this lady, you know, her friend. So we have like lots of little moments like this that show how intense Jasmine is. There's also some lady who's like a therapist, and she's doing some sort of research on trauma, I think, and she asks if Jasmine would be willing to help with this research, and she has to wear like this helmet and think about all of these traumatic things or whatever, I don't know, or like record she's like wearing a helmet, and I think it's like scanning her brainwaves as she's talking to a recorder, talking about all of her trauma. And she does this like throughout the course of this book, and it's also a little bit shady, this therapist. And then we fast forward, Jasmine goes to this wellness center for the first time. It's weird. And then she meets up with her friends, and then the guy had gone to this wellness, some sort of like retreat. I think it was like more than one day or something. And he comes back, and he used to have, he's like a art collector or something like that. He had a room that was like a whole gallery in their house of like really interesting, provocative, but also like kind of traumatic black art. And they all were all admiring it. And then suddenly he comes back. Oh, he also had dreads. He comes back, clean shaven, cut hair. The entire gallery, all of the art's gone. It's being turned into their own little mini wellness room. All of a sudden, he's like, I'm not interested in this Black Lives Matter chapter. He's like clearly changed, okay? Then we fast forward. Something similar happens to Keisha. Her wife is like really like into the wellness thing. She ends up going up there as well, going on a little retreat. She comes back, boom, not interested. She's being weird, right? So Jasmine is clearly like, there's some fucked up shit going on here. And then at the end of some of these chapters, we get these like little like news clippings, various things, news clippings, abstracts from the therapist researcher, various things like that about the various people in this neighborhood, and the fact that they actually did have like some terrible traumatic thing that happened to them, and then now they're here and they're like not talking about it. There's nothing, like pretending like nothing wrong has happened. And then we fast forward. Like I said, there's not like that much stuff going on in this book, so I'm just gonna fast forward to the end, okay? And this is where the Get Out meets Stepford Wives really kicks into gear, okay? Jasmine realizes that something fishy is going on with this wellness retreat. Also, like, there's like a lot of emphasis on respectability politics, having straight hair, clean shaven, how you're dressed, this idea that lighter skin is better, blah 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 blah. So that air is kind of going on throughout the book. So then we fast forward. Jasmine's like, we need to get the fuck out of here, to King. She's like, actually, like, we need to go. Like, there's something really weird going on. And then she ends up at the wellness center, and like everybody's there, and they're like, we're expecting you. And she's like, bro, this is really sketchy. Her son's gone. Oh, I think her son was gone, and they're like, you have to come to the wellness retreat to get him or something like that. She shows up. She's like, where's my son? And he's there too, and he's like, don't worry, he's safe. So then they snatch her. They're basically like taking her through this wellness center, and she's the whole time just like, where's my son? King's like, don't worry. And then they take her in and they strap her to a chair, okay? And then they start adding like IV and like all of this like oxygen tanks. There's a bunch of other medical equipment up in there. Okay. And basically what happens is that they've been turning people white. Like literally turning people white. Okay, that's the whole secret thing that's been going on in this wellness center, because there's been people like disappearing too from the town, like people who used to live there and then they're gone all of a sudden, and she's been trying to investigate what's going on too. And so yeah, she's like makes this realization that they're turning people white. King was in on it the whole time. Okay, he knew what was going on. Oh, they've been making them drink these like energy drinks or whatever throughout the whole story as well, which is like prepping their bodies to like turn white or whatever. And so whatever, he's like, listen, we gotta be white. She's like, what the fuck? And then they did it to her son, and then they turn her white. They turn her white. They wipe her memories of being a black woman. And then she moves into another town with her white family. And that is the end of the story. Truly a crazy experience. So let's talk about it. So I kind of had a feeling that this is where we were going, right? Like all of the context clues, all of the hints being dropped. I was like, okay, I think I know what's going on. I think they're turning people white. I kind of like figured that out like halfway through the book, right? But what I thought was going to happen was that she was gonna like fight somehow or make it out. Like, I didn't think that the story was gonna end with her just turning white and that was it. And I was like, that's actually kind of crazy. Now, I saw some people interpret this as the author saying that it was better to be white, and I don't know that I necessarily agree with that interpretation of the ending. Like, the whole scene is pretty like horrific. It's scary, and I feel like it just ended in a scary way. I don't think that that's what the author was saying. It was a choice, most certainly, and one that I still don't know that I quite understand why it needed to end this way. And that kind of brings me to like all of my issues with this book. So number one, as I kind of alluded to, Jasmine is kind of just like a caricature of a social justice warrior. It's one thing to like have an unlikable character who, like, I think we could have had her the same way, but given her more depth and nuance, like make her a more full realized individual who like is challenged and kind of learns like, okay, I'm being a little bit much. Like, it's important to care about and fight for these rights and whatever. But it's very clear that she has a very, like, she's like bordering on Hotep, you know what I mean? Like, she has a very tunnel visioned idea of what it means to be like a good black person and what it means to care about these issues. And I think that actually would have been a really interesting story to see, like, to follow a character like that, but like as a more realized individual who is like learning that like maybe I'm being too much, or like maybe she doesn't learn, but like, do you know what I mean? I just feel like she felt like a caricature. And it's one thing, I don't know, like maybe Nicola Yoon thought that she was writing like a satire, but I just don't know that it really landed very well, because ultimately at the end of it, it's like what are we satirizing, and what are we supposed to glean from this? Because at the end, I still don't know. I don't know. When it comes to satire, like, I know that it can have an open ending, and I don't mind an open ending. I think that you can leave it open for interpretation and people can take away different things from the end of the story. But I think in order to effectively write a satire, I feel like you really need to, one, understand the topic very well, understand what you're satirizing and like how you're doing so. And then I do feel like you kind of like need to have formulated your own opinion. Not that you necessarily have to put what you think into the book, but I think in order to effectively write a satire, you have to kind of know what you think about said topic. Do you know what I mean? And I think it's very clear that Nicola Yoon does it. And I think that becomes apparent too when you listen to how she talks about this book and what has inspired her. And just talking about this book in general and what she wanted people to take away from it. One of the most common things that I saw her describe this book as throughout the interviews that I watched is that, again, it was like this Get Out meets Stepford Wives combo, and that she was inspired to write this story. Let me just make sure I have this right. She was inspired to write this story after coming out of a panel on racism with a friend, and she went and got drinks with a friend after, and they started talking about the panel, and her friend said something along the lines of, who do you think we would be if we were white? Something along those lines. Like, if our like historical trauma and all the racism, like if we weren't black and we didn't have that context of race, like who would we be, or something like that, if I'm understanding correctly. And I will link all of the interviews that I watched below so that y'all can go look at them too. And she was like, oh, that really was thought-provoking for her, and she said that she still like didn't know the answer. And I think that's okay, but it just feels like there wasn't much thought. Like, it just, another thing that she said is that she wrote this over the course of like 6 weeks, so very quickly, in the middle of the George Floyd uprisings. That's kind of like what initially triggered her to write this book, and she wrote it very quickly, and it took another few years for her to, you know, actually edit it and, you know, make it more cohesive and work with her editor, and then for it to come out as its complete piece. And it does feel like someone who is experiencing the George Floyd uprisings and like just kind of writing very quickly all of their thoughts without thinking too much about it, you know? And I don't want to come across as condescending, because like, I don't know Nicola Yoon, and she's also older than me. She's lived more life than me. She has more experience than I do. You know, and I don't know what all she has experienced in her life. So I want to put that caveat, right? But this book feels like it was written by somebody who has just seriously began to think about race in the United States and its implications and its impacts. Like, of course, it's not the first time that she's thought about it, but like, I think in a more serious manner. I think if you're going to write a book where it's a horror and or a thriller that's like very heavily based on racial trauma, like, you have to handle it with a lot of care. And I just don't know that that was done here. It really does feel like someone kind of like very seriously grappling with these issues for the first time and hasn't really come to any conclusions. And I don't think you need to have full conclusions. Like what? It's been like 400, 500 years of racism. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know that we're ever, like, anyone will ever have full conclusions about anything at this point. You know what I mean? But it just feels very beginner to me. And I question who the audience is for this book. And it's one thing to just like write a book and it appeals to everyone, right? But something about this book feels like it was not written specifically with Black people in mind. Like, it actually feels exclusionary of Black people to me in some way. Every character is kind of a caricature. Jasmine's a caricature, but also the other residents of this town are caricatures in the complete opposite way, almost as if like the conservative Black individual who is also like dealing with a lot of internalized racism and has like also another very narrow view of blackness. It just feels like we have two of the extremes fighting against each other in this, like in this book. But it's like, I feel like most Black people kind of exist within a spectrum. Not to say that there aren't hoteps, and not to say that there aren't weirdo conservative Black people. Do you know what I mean? But I feel like there just wasn't a lot of room for like a nuanced experience of Blackness throughout this book, and that's why it feels like it was written with Black people as an exclusion almost. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't feel very kind. And not to say that we can't call out, again, those two extremes or whatever. And whether or not one is, well, I have my own personal opinions of which one is better than the other, of course. But I don't know. It just doesn't feel like a book that has approached these topics with the variety of Black experiences in mind, and why it feels like it doesn't really want to explore why we would even have those extremes to begin with. It just, yeah. I feel like I'm kind of losing the plot here a little bit. I don't know. Do I think Nicola Yoon is racist? No. Do I think that she might be experiencing internalized racism? Maybe. Again, I don't know her personally, and I don't think that's necessarily for me to decide just based off of this book, because again, I don't know exactly what was going on in her mind with this book. Yeah, I don't know. I think what like makes this book so much more disappointing is that it's not like poorly written. I think it's like fine. I think there's a lot of interesting ideas that are being presented, and I think there are interesting themes that the author is trying to explore. I just don't know. I just felt like it went so out of left field all of a sudden, and it's like, I don't know what we're doing here. And it just seems like over and over again, this kind of thread that I keep hearing from Nicola Yoon is that she doesn't know, she doesn't have the answers, but she wants people to talk about it. And I think that's fine. But I also just, I don't know. It feels almost, I don't know how to explain my thoughts on this. But again, like, it's one thing to have an open-ended kind of open story where people can kind of interpret it how they want, but I just feel like maybe you should have some ideas of your interpretation of these things, like some idea what you want people to take away. I think the problem is that she doesn't even know what to take away from her own book, and it just feels so all over the place. It's both saying nothing and then leaving it open to such weird interpretations. Like, while I disagree that the ending is saying that it's better to be white, I can understand how this book would lead some people to feel like that's what this book is saying. Like, it's just so open and amorphous that it almost comes back around to leading people to very weird directions. I don't know if I'm making sense when I'm saying this. It's just like, I'm not shocked and or surprised by people who left this book feeling that way. It also, like, in terms, like, I don't need Jasmine to have been punished. Like, for the most part, like, I understand where she's coming from, and while I feel like she needed to chill and that she was bordering on hotepism and was wrong on some occasions, just in general, but how she approached certain conversations with people, she doesn't actually change throughout this book. she actually remains pretty stagnant of a character. There are moments where it feels like, oh, like she's kind of being called out and she's starting to think about some of her behaviors. But then the ending happens and it kind of almost bolsters her behaviors in a sense, because it's like she was almost like right all along. I don't know what it's saying. I'm just confused. I'm confused. I don't know. I just think it was very poorly done. And I'm curious. I mean, I very much believe that authors should stay off of Goodreads. They should not read their own reviews. But I am kind of curious I'm kind of curious to see if she has received any reviews or has looked at them or has received any feedback from her peers about this book and what she kind of thinks about the reception of her book. I find myself like without a conclusion, really. I gave it 2 stars at the end of the day, and it just kind of makes me a little bit sad because I think we could have had something really interesting and really great. I really do think that this kind of leans into the, let's call it the get outification of the horror thriller genre, not just in books, but even in movies. I just feel like Get Out had so many sons, you know, that didn't actually live up to what Get Out did and what made Get Out work. I think it feels similar to that. I just don't know that it knows what it wanted to be. And yeah. So that's it. I've been rambling. I don't even know if any of this made any sense, but I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments. If you've read this book, if you haven't, I'd still love to know your thoughts. I don't know. I will catch y'all in the next video, and I hope y'all have a great rest of your day.